I hit the Mafia boss in front of everyone for my brother. He chuckled and said, "That's real." The air in Bellissimo restaurant hung heavy with expensive cologne and whispered deals, the chandeliers casting deceptive warmth over cold hearts and calculating eyes. I moved between tables with practiced efficiency, the weight of the serving tray nothing compared to the burden of worry crushing my chest about my brother. My hands trembled slightly as I refilled water glasses, my gaze continuously darting to the VIP section where Maxim Kovrov held court, his dark eyes occasionally meeting mine with unsettling interest. The crisp white of my uniform felt suddenly restrictive as I watched him laugh, while my brother sat pale-faced beside him. The memory of last night's phone call from Jake sliced through me, his voice breaking as he confessed to borrowing money from the Kovrov family, money he couldn't possibly repay. My throat tightened as I overheard snippets of conversation, words like example and consequences floating above the gentle piano music, when Maxim's hand clamped down on Jake's shoulder, causing my brother to wince in barely disguised pain. Something primal and protective surged through my veins. Without conscious thought, my feet carried me across the polished floor, weaving between startled patrons as I approached the most dangerous man in the city. Time seemed to slow as I reached the table, my brother's wide eyes meeting mine in horror, before I turned to face the man who held his life in merciless hands. Kovrov looked up with mild curiosity, one eyebrow slightly raised, as if my presence was merely an unexpected appetizer before the main course. The sound was sharp and definitive, my palm connecting with his cheek, the impact sending his head snapping sideways while silence crashed through the restaurant like a physical wave. My hand stung, my heart hammered painfully against my ribs, and for one terrifying moment, I accepted I would not leave this place alive. His bodyguards tensed, hands reaching inside jackets, but froze when Kovrov raised one finger, the crimson mark of my hand blooming across his angular face. He touched his cheek with deliberate slowness. Then something unexpected happened. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. "That's real," he said, voice carrying across the deathly quiet room, a strange respect flickering behind his eyes as he studied my face. "Everyone here wears masks, but you're something authentic in a world of pretenders." My brother's face had drained of all color, sweat beading on his forehead as the implications of my impulsive action sank in. Jake had told me stories about Kovrov's brutality, about people who disappeared for far less disrespect than what I had just shown. The restaurant remained frozen in a tableau of shock, waitstaff and patrons alike holding their breath as Maxim Kovrov slowly stood, his impressive height forcing me to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. His cologne, expensive and subtle with notes of sandalwood, enveloped me as he leaned closer. "Come to my office tomorrow, 8 p.m., he said softly, his accent more pronounced in the hushed tone. "We'll discuss how you're going to make this right, and perhaps save your brother's fingers while we're at it." I wanted to scream, to run, to beg, but something in his expression stopped me, a flicker of genuine curiosity that seemed almost human beneath the predatory exterior. Jake's eyes pleaded with me across the table, silently begging me not to make things worse. My voice emerged steadier than I felt, the words surprising even me, as I replied, "I finish my shift at 7:30. The absurdity of negotiating meeting times with a man who could order my death with a nod wasn't lost on me. A genuine chuckle escaped him then, deep and unexpected like thunder on a clear day, catching everyone off guard. "Punctuality, I admire that," he said, pressing a business card into my palm, his fingers lingering a moment too long against mine. With a snap of his fingers, Kovrov and his entourage rose in unison, leaving generous bills scattered across the table like autumn leaves. At the door, he paused, turning back to find my eyes still watching him. "Don't be late, Ava," he said, using my name though I'd never introduced myself. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances, my colleagues giving me a wide berth as if my impending doom might somehow be contagious. My manager, a nervous man with perpetually damp palms, pulled me aside with a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration in his eyes. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jake hissed, when he cornered me in the back alley during my break, his fingers digging into my shoulders. "Kovrov doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. He's going to make an example of you." The weight of the business card in my pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour, the embossed letters catching against my fingertips whenever I anxiously checked to ensure it was still there. Simple black text on cream cardstock, an address in the wealthiest part of the city. My apartment felt different when I finally returned home that night, shadows stretching longer across familiar walls, as if the darkness itself was reaching for me. Every creak and settling sound made me jump, imagination conjuring men in expensive suits waiting to deliver Kovrov's delayed vengeance. Sleep evaded me completely, leaving me to stare at the ceiling as I replayed the moment of impact again and again, the surprising softness of his skin beneath my palm, the flash of something like appreciation in his eyes. Not anger, not the murderous rage I'd expected, but something more complex. By morning, dark circles shadowed my eyes as I sat across from Jake at my tiny kitchen table, steam rising from untouched coffee between us. "I'll fix this," I promised, though I had no idea how I could possibly make amends with a man whose reputation was built on unforgiving brutality. "You can't fix this, Ava," Jake replied, running trembling fingers through his disheveled hair. "Do you know what happened to the last person who disrespected him in public? They found pieces washing up along the riverbank for weeks." Outside my window, the city continued its relentless pace, people rushing to jobs and meetings, oblivious to the fact that my world had tilted on its axis. A delivery truck backfired, making us both flinch, paranoia already threading its way through our normal reactions. The hours ticked by with excruciating slowness, each minute bringing me closer to the meeting that might be my last. I dressed with careful consideration, not too formal, not too casual, a silent statement that I wasn't cowering, yet respected the gravity of the situation. The taxi driver gave me a concerned look when I provided the address, his eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "Business or pleasure?" he asked conversationally, clearly recognizing the exclusive location where only the wealthy or connected ventured. "Neither," I answered honestly, watching familiar neighborhoods give way to increasingly opulent surroundings, streets lined with luxury boutiques and buildings with doormen. The disparity between my world and Kovrov's couldn't have been more stark. My heart pounded painfully as the taxi pulled up to a gleaming high-rise that seemed to touch the darkening sky, glass and steel stretching upward like a modern fortress. The doorman's eyes widened slightly at my name, a reaction that did nothing to calm my frayed nerves. The private elevator rose with silent efficiency, each floor bringing me closer to whatever fate Kovrov had planned. I tried to steady my breathing, focusing on the faint reflection of myself in the polished doors, chin raised, shoulders back, the picture of defiance despite the fear churning inside. When the doors finally opened, I stepped directly into a penthouse that breathed luxury from every surface. Marble floors, artwork worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city spread below like a glittering carpet. And there, silhouetted against the panoramic view, stood Maxim Kovrov. "Precisely on time," he commented without turning, his voice carrying across the vast space. "Come closer, Ava. I don't bite unless explicitly provoked, and you've already done that once today." His penthouse smelled of leather and something distinctly masculine, an underlying note that reminded me of thunderstorms, powerful and unpredictable. Kovrov turned slowly, crystal tumbler in hand, the amber liquid catching the light as he gestured toward an adjacent chair. "Your brother owes me $300,000, he stated without preamble, watching my face carefully as the number registered. Money borrowed to cover gambling debts that he foolishly thought he could repay with more gambling. The figure struck me like a physical blow, impossible in its magnitude. More money than I could hope to see in years of waitressing. "I don't have that kind of money," I admitted, proud that my voice remained steady, despite the tremor in my hands. Maxim's laugh was surprisingly warm, genuine amusement dancing in eyes the color of expensive whiskey. "Of course you don't," he agreed, moving to sit across from me, close enough that I caught the faint scar running along his jawline, usually invisible from a distance. "What I need isn't your money, Ava," he continued, my name rolling off his tongue with surprising softness. "What I need is someone I can trust, someone real in a world of masks and lies, someone who values family enough to risk everything." Confusion replaced fear as he outlined his proposition. I would work directly for him for 6 months, serving as his personal assistant, his eyes and ears in places where his presence would raise alarms. My brother's debt would be considered paid in full when my service ended. "Why me?" I asked, suspicion threading through my thoughts as I tried to understand his angle. "You have people who are trained, loyal, people who didn't slap you in front of your associates." Something darkened in his expression then, a shadow passing across features that might have been handsome, if not for the cruelty they were capable of expressing. "Perhaps it was precisely that slap that qualified you," he said softly, leaning forward. Loyalty can be bought, but courage and integrity cannot. My mind raced through limited options. There were none. Not really. Not if I wanted Jake to keep all his fingers and possibly his life. The devil across from me knew this. His patience as he waited for my answer merely performative politeness, rather than actual uncertainty about my response. If I agree, I began cautiously, I need your word that my brother is completely clear of his debt, that he'll be safe from your organization, and that my obligation ends after 6 months with no further demands. Maxim's smile was slow and measured, like a predator who had successfully cornered its prey. You have my word, he replied, extending his hand across the space between us. Do we have a deal, Ava? The moment stretched between us, heavy with implication and unspoken warnings. His hand remained steady, waiting for mine to complete the bargain that would irrevocably change my life and save my brother's. With a deep breath that did little to calm my racing heart, I reached forward. His skin was warm and surprisingly soft against mine, his grip firm but not painfully so, the handshake of a businessman rather than a mobster. Something electric passed between us at the contact, a jolt of awareness that I immediately tried to dismiss as fear. You begin tomorrow, he said, releasing my hand, but somehow maintaining the invisible tether between us. My driver will collect you at 7 a.m. Pack enough for extended stays away from home. The nature of my business requires frequent travel. Questions crowded my throat, fighting to be asked. What exactly would I be doing? How dangerous would it be? What happened to the last person who held this position? But I swallowed them down, recognizing the dismissal in his tone. As if reading my thoughts, Maxim added, I don't expect blind obedience, Ava. Questions are welcome, provided they're asked at appropriate times. Your insight is part of what I'm investing in. The elevator doors closed on his enigmatic expression, leaving me to descend alone with the weight of our agreement pressing down on me. The city lights blurred through my tears as the taxi carried me home, the business card now feeling like a contract signed in invisible blood. The sleek black car arrived precisely at 7, the driver's face impassive as he held the door open without speaking a word. I slid into the plush leather interior, my small suitcase and nervous heartbeat my only companions for the silent journey across town. Maxim's corporate headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming skyscraper, legitimate businesses on the lower levels, providing perfect cover for whatever happened above the 40th floor. The receptionist, striking in her cold beauty, assessed me with calculating eyes before directing me to a private elevator. You survived the night, Maxim observed when I entered his office, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the city like a king surveying his kingdom. Many in your position would have run, futile, but human nature nonetheless. My new workspace adjoined his, separated by a glass wall that could turn opaque at the touch of a button, transparency or privacy at his whim. The desk was immaculate, top-of-the-line technology awaiting my touch, and a sleek leather chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Your job is to anticipate my needs before I express them, he explained, sliding a secure phone across the polished surface. To observe what others miss, to question what seems inconsistent, and to never, under any circumstances, lie to me. The morning passed in a blur of information. Security protocols, scheduling systems, confidentiality agreements with penalties I didn't want to contemplate. Maxim moved with contained energy, each gesture precise, each instruction clear and expecting immediate comprehension. Lunch arrived without being ordered, prepared exactly to his preferences, another example of the machine-like efficiency that surrounded him. I watched him eat with surprising delicacy for such powerful hands, noting how staff entered his presence with mingled fear and reverence. Why did my brother come to you for money? I asked during a rare moment of quiet, curiosity overwhelming caution. There are legal lenders, banks, family. Why choose someone with your reputation? His expression shifted, amusement replacing the business-like mask he'd worn all morning. Because I said yes when everyone else said no, he replied simply, wiping his mouth with deliberate care. I rarely deny people the opportunity to make costly mistakes. The afternoon brought a parade of visitors, some in expensive suits discussing legitimate business, others with hardened eyes and barely concealed weapons discussing matters in coded language. I observed them all, sensing subtle hierarchies, noticing who met Maxim's gaze and who couldn't. Watch their hands, not their eyes, Maxim murmured when a particularly nervous associate left. Eyes can lie convincingly, but hands betray, fidgeting, perspiration. tension, all signs of deception that words can't disguise. My first test came unexpectedly, a call I was instructed to take privately while Maxime observed through the glass. The caller, believing he spoke to Maxime's established assistant, revealed plans involving a shipment at the docks that didn't align with what I'd seen in the schedule. The Petrov family has been attempting to infiltrate my organization for months, Maxime explained afterward, approval warming his tone. Your instinct to probe for details rather than dismissing the inconsistency was correct. You may have prevented a significant problem. The day stretched into evening, city lights replacing sunlight as we continued working without acknowledgement of conventional business hours. When I finally checked my phone, I discovered 17 missed calls from Jake, each more panicked than the last. Go, Maxime said, noticing my expression. Your brother needs reassurance that you haven't disappeared into my world without a trace. But remember, Ava, his voice dropped lower, while you're free to discuss your well-being with him, the content of your work here is between us alone. Days blurred into weeks as I adapted to Maxime's world, a universe of sharp contrasts where charity galas followed tense meetings with rival families, where legitimate business transactions provided perfect cover for activities I pretended not to fully comprehend. My role expanded beyond simple assistance to genuine partnership. Your instincts are remarkable, he commented one evening as we reviewed security footage showing subtle body language that had made me flag a potential informant. You see people as they truly are, not as they present themselves. The threat came without warning. A midnight call about shipments redirected, territories challenged, and the unmistakable fingerprints of the Castellini family attempting to use Maxime's temporary distraction to their advantage. I watched his face harden into something terrifying as plans formed behind his eyes. Maxime insisted I accompany him to his secure estate outside the city, the countryside rushing past the bulletproof windows as his driver navigated dark roads with practiced precision. The property materialized from the darkness, imposing stone and modern security creating an impenetrable fortress. You'll stay here until I neutralize the threat, he stated. Not a request, but a command as we entered the warmth of his private residence. Unlike the sleek minimalism of his penthouse, this space held rich woods, books, and surprising warmth, glimpses of the man behind the monster. The storm arrived with biblical fury that night, lightning illuminating the security perimeter as rain lashed against ancient windows. I stood watching nature's violence mirror the human conflicts brewing across the city, jumping when Maxime appeared silently beside me. You're not what I expected, he said softly, closer than necessary as we stood in darkness broken only by occasional lightning. When I demanded your service as payment, I thought I was acquiring a useful pawn, not a... He paused, seemingly surprised by his own thoughts. Heat radiated from his proximity, his customary cologne mingling with the earthier scent of rain and expensive whiskey on his breath. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the dangerous attraction that had been building between us. Inappropriate, impossible, and undeniable. The power failed with perfect dramatic timing, plunging the mansion into darkness that felt intimate rather than threatening. Emergency lighting cast soft, golden glows through hallways as Maxime guided me toward the library, where a fireplace offered both light and warmth. You fear me still, he observed, firelight casting dramatic shadows across the angles of his face as he poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. Yet you've stopped flinching when I move near you. Progress, perhaps? The whiskey burned pleasantly, liquid courage warming my voice as I finally asked the question that had haunted me for weeks. How many people have you killed, Maxime? The words hung between us, honest and impossible to retract. His laugh held no humor, only a weariness I hadn't expected. Directly? Fewer than my reputation suggests, he answered, staring into the flames. Through orders given? More than I care to count in quiet moments like this. Something in his vulnerability emboldened me, the storm outside creating a pocket universe where normal boundaries seemed suspended. Do you ever regret the path you've chosen? I asked, studying his profile as lightning briefly overpowered the firelight. My father was murdered when I was 12, he replied after a weighted silence, surprising me with this unexpected confidence. I watched from a closet as men tortured him for information before executing him. My path wasn't chosen so much as inherited. Morning arrived with cleared skies, and the startling intimacy of having fallen asleep in adjacent library chairs, our conversation having stretched until exhaustion claimed us both. I woke to find Maxime watching me, his expression unguarded in ways I'd never witnessed before. The attack came 3 days later, not from rival families, but from Maxim's inner circle, the betrayal orchestrated by his most trusted lieutenant, Carlo. I discovered the plot while organizing digital files, finding encrypted communications that revealed a coordinated ambush planned for that evening. My hands trembled as I called Maxim, his phone ringing endlessly before going to voicemail, unprecedented and terrifying in its implications. The office felt suddenly hostile, every face a potential conspirator as I gathered my things with forced casualness. Security cameras showed Maxim leaving with Carlo an hour earlier, headed toward the warehouse district for what was supposedly a routine inspection. The same warehouses mentioned in the encrypted files detailing the planned betrayal. I bypassed standard protocols, using emergency overrides Maxim had shown me, just in case, to access his private security team, men loyal to him personally rather than the organization. Their commander's eyes widened at my explanation, pieces fitting into a puzzle he'd sensed but couldn't prove. "Stay here," he ordered, as his team mobilized with frightening efficiency, weapons appearing from concealed locations as communication systems crackled to life. "This is no place for you if we're correct about Carlo's intentions." The waiting was unbearable, minutes stretching like hours as I imagined worst-case scenarios playing out across the city. When my secure phone finally buzzed with coordinates and a single word, "Come," I didn't hesitate despite the obvious danger. The warehouse loomed against the twilight sky, emergency vehicles' lights reflecting off puddles from recent rain while medical personnel rushed inside. My heart froze at the stretcher being carried out, Maxim's imposing form looking suddenly vulnerable beneath bloodied bandages. "You saved my life," he rasped when I reached his side, his hand finding mine with surprising strength despite his injuries. "How did you discover Carlo's plan when my own security team missed it?" The ambulance ride was surreal. This powerful man now connected to monitors that beeped with reassuring regularity as paramedics worked around us. I explained my discovery in hushed tones, his eyes never leaving mine despite the pain medication gradually taking effect. "Pattern recognition," he murmured with something like pride. "You saw connections where others saw coincidence." Carlo spent 15 years earning my trust only to sell it to the Castellinis for territory rights. The private hospital suite, transformed into a temporary command center, as Maxim refused to relinquish control, despite doctors' protests. From his bed, he orchestrated responses to the attempted coup, loyal captains eliminating Carlo's collaborators with brutal efficiency. I remained at his side through it all, taking notes, relaying orders, and occasionally insisting he rest when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm his legendary stamina. The dynamic between us had shifted. My presence no longer negotiated service, but something chosen, something necessary. "They'll try again," Maxim stated on the third night, his voice stronger, as healing progressed with the same determination that characterized everything he did. "The organization smells blood in the water, perceived weakness that must be countered immediately and decisively." The succession of visitors brought reports of territory secured, loyalty tests conducted, and examples made of those who had sided with Carlo. I watched Maxim absorb information and deliver judgments with renewed ruthlessness, the vulnerable man from the storm-swept mansion nowhere to be seen. "Your brother called," I mentioned during a rare moment alone, hesitation in my voice as I broached the subject. "He's heard rumors about the attempt on your life, and is worried about my safety as your associate." Something softened in Maxim's expression, a brief glimpse behind the armor he'd reinforced since the attack. "Invite him here tomorrow," he suggested, surprising me completely. "It's time I met the man whose debt delivered you into my world." The meeting between Maxim and Jake defied all my expectations. Instead of intimidation, there was an unexpected respect as Maxim explained the failed coup and my role in thwarting it. My brother's expression shifted from terror to stunned disbelief as he processed my new position of trust within the organization. "Your debt is forgiven completely," Maxim stated, signing documents that Jake accepted with trembling hands. "Your sister has more than fulfilled her obligation. Her continued presence is now her choice, not my demand." That revelation hung in the air between us after Jake left, the implication clear. I could walk away, return to my old life, pretend the past months had never happened. The choice stretched before me like a crossroads. One path leading to safety and normalcy, the other into darkness with unexpected flashes of light. "I'm staying," I said simply, the decision already made somewhere between discovering the betrayal and rushing to his side. Maxim's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes, a flash of relief quickly masked, told me more than words could convey. Recovery brought Maxime back to full strength with remarkable speed. His return to headquarters marked by increased security and subtle changes in how subordinates addressed me. No longer just his assistant, I had become something undefined yet undeniably significant in their eyes. The ripples from Carlo's betrayal spread through the city's underworld, creating vulnerabilities the Castellini family was quick to exploit. Reports of encroachment on Kovrov territory arrived daily, each incident more brazen than the last, clearly testing Maxim's resolve and recovered strength. "They've taken Jake," the message came 6 weeks after the hospital, delivered by a breathless courier who had found my brother's apartment ransacked. The Castellini signature, a single playing card, the King of Spades, left no question about the perpetrators or the message they were sending. Maxim's response was immediate and chilling in its calmness. Resources mobilized, informants activated, and surveillance footage gathered from every camera within 10 blocks of Jake's home. Within hours, we had a location, a Castellini warehouse near the industrial harbor. "This is my fight," I insisted. Strapping on the bulletproof vest Maxim's security chief had adjusted to my smaller frame. "They took him because of me, because they know I matter to you now. They're using my brother to draw us both out." The warehouse loomed dark and foreboding against the night sky, distant shipping containers creating a labyrinth of metal and shadow. Maxim's men moved with practiced silence, taking positions around the perimeter, while we approached the side entrance indicated by their intelligence. "Remember what I taught you," Maxim whispered, the weight of the gun he'd insisted I carry unfamiliar against my palm. "Hesitation gets you killed in this world. If someone raises a weapon, you shoot first and process the morality later." The first gunshot shattered the night silence, followed by an orchestrated chaos of movement and shouted commands. Maxim pushed me behind a concrete pillar, as return fire pinged against metal surfaces, the carefully planned extraction devolving into a firefight. I spotted Jake through a grimy window, bound to a chair, face bloodied but conscious, guarded by 2 men whose attention had shifted to the commotion outside. Using the distraction, I slipped through an unguarded service door, heart pounding so loudly I feared it would give away my position. "Don't move," I commanded, stepping into the room with my weapon raised exactly as Maxim had taught me. Firm grip, steady aim, finger properly positioned near the trigger. The guards turned in surprise, clearly not expecting a woman to be part of the assault team. What happened next unfolded with dreamlike slowness. One guard reaching for his weapon, Maxim appearing in the doorway behind me, the deafening sound of gunshots echoing in the confined space. Blood bloomed across the guard's chest, while the second man raised his hands in immediate surrender. The aftermath of Jake's rescue transformed my relationship with Maxim's world. No longer an observer on the periphery, I had crossed a line by participating directly in organization business. The blood on the warehouse floor had changed something fundamental in how both Maxim and his people viewed me. "You didn't hesitate," Maxim noted days later as we watched the sunrise from his penthouse, steam rising from coffee cups cradled in our hands. "When that guard moved for his weapon, your instincts were perfect. Survival over sentiment." Jake recovered quickly from his ordeal, accepting Maxim's offer of a secure apartment and legitimate job within the Kovrov corporate structure. My brother's gratitude manifested as an unexpected acceptance of my relationship with Maxim, whatever undefined shape it had taken. "The Castellinis have requested a meeting," Maxim announced one morning, his tone deliberately casual despite the significance of such an overture after months of escalating tension. "Their patriarch wants to discuss terms. Apparently our response to their latest provocation has made an impression." The meeting location, a private room at the Continental, neutral territory respected by all families, hummed with dangerous energy as security details from both organizations maintained watchful distance. Old Giuseppe Castellini entered with the slow dignity of his 70 years, flanked by his son Paolo and their consigliere. "You bring a woman to war talks?" Paolo sneered, his gaze dismissive as it swept over me. "Is this your secretary or your entertainment for after our business concludes?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Maxim's expression hardened, but it was my hand that shot out to grip his wrist, silently communicating restraint. This negotiation was too important to derail over an insult, no matter how deliberately provocative. "I bring my partner to talks that affect our future," Maxim replied with deadly softness, covering my hand with his own in a gesture that made Paolo's eyes widen slightly. "She earned that place by saving my life when your family tried to take it." Old Giuseppe's weathered face revealed nothing as he assessed me with eyes that had witnessed decades of violence and power struggles. "The woman who slapped Maxim Kovrov and lived. Your reputation precedes you," he said finally, unexpected respect coloring his tone. The negotiations proceeded with the delicate dance of predators sharing limited territory, concessions offered, boundaries re-established, and mutual threats elegantly veiled behind diplomatic phrasing. I observed more than spoke, noting the power dynamics between father and son, the subtle tells revealing their true positions. "One final term," Giuseppe stated as agreements took shape, his gaze shifting deliberately between Maxim and me. "A traditional alliance between families, my granddaughter Bianca and you, Kovrov, a marriage to cement peace where blood has failed." The proposal hung in the air like a live grenade, its implications detonating in my chest with painful clarity. Political marriages remained common practice among the old families, alliances forged through bloodlines rather than temporary agreements that could be broken when convenient. Maxim's expression revealed nothing, years of negotiation having perfected his poker face, but beneath the table, his hand found mine, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness. "An interesting proposal," he replied neutrally, neither accepting nor rejecting the offer. "Consider carefully," Giuseppe added with knowing eyes that missed nothing, especially not our clasped hands. "Peace through marriage brings benefits beyond territory. It creates legacy, continuity, respect from the old families who still control the real power in this city." The ride back to headquarters passed in weighted silence, the implications of Giuseppe's offer expanding to fill every inch of space between us. I stared out the window at passing streets, each building blurring like my thoughts, as I contemplated a future suddenly threatened by politics and tradition. "I won't do it," Maxim stated that evening as we stood on his penthouse balcony, city lights spread before us like fallen stars. His voice carried absolute certainty, unexpected in a man whose decisions were usually calculated weighing of advantage rather than emotional response. "You should consider it objectively," I replied, pride forcing the words despite the ache they caused. "Strategic marriages have built empires throughout history. Your organization would benefit from the stability such an alliance would bring." The ultimatum came 3 days later. Accept the marriage alliance or prepare for renewed warfare that would drain both families of blood and resources. Giuseppe delivered the message personally during a tense lunch meeting, his ancient eyes revealing genuine regret beneath the necessary business. "Some traditions exist for good reason," the old man counseled, paternal wisdom directed at Maxim with surprising gentleness. "Our world requires structure, continuity, respect for the old ways that have sustained our families through generations of challenges." Maxim's response was measured, diplomatic assurances of careful consideration that revealed nothing of the fierce arguments we'd had behind closed doors. I had pushed him toward acceptance despite the personal cost, the logical part of my brain overwhelming my heart's desperate protest. "You once slapped me for threatening your brother," Maxim said that night, fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with uncharacteristic tenderness. "Now you're willing to push me into another woman's arms to protect my organization. Your loyalty remains your most beautiful and frustrating quality." The engagement announcement appeared in both legitimate newspapers and underground channels the following week. Maxim Kovrov to wed Bianca Castellini in a union that would reshape the city's power dynamics. I stood beside him at the press conference, face carefully composed into professional neutrality. Preparations for the engagement gala consumed the organization, the event designed to showcase both families' legitimate business interests while serving as a declaration of the new alliance to the underworld. Security arrangements alone required coordination between traditionally hostile forces now attempting cooperation. "Wear this," Maxim instructed the evening of the gala, presenting a velvet box containing an emerald necklace that caught light with hypnotic intensity. "Tonight you represent not just yourself but my interests. I need you visible, undeniable, impossible to overlook." The ballroom of the Grand Hotel transformed into a glittering showcase of power and wealth, rival families mingling with politicians, business leaders, and carefully vetted press. I moved through the crowd with practiced grace, the emerald heavy against my collarbone like a beautiful shackle. Bianca Castellini proved nothing like I had imagined. Not the spoiled princess or calculating manipulator I had prepared to hate, but a quietly intelligent woman with sad eyes that suggested her own desires had never factored into family decisions. We assessed each other with silent recognition of our mutual imprisonment by circumstance. "I never wanted this," she confided during a brief moment alone, champagne flute clutched like a lifeline in manicured fingers. Just as you never wanted to lose him, we're both pawns moved by men playing games designed centuries before we were born. The traditional toast approached, the moment when both families would publicly solidify their commitment to the alliance, witnesses ensuring neither could later claim misunderstanding or miscommunication. Giuseppe rose first, ancient dignity commanding immediate silence from the assembled guests. What happened next unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. Maxime approaching the microphone with regal confidence, adjusting it with deliberate precision as anticipatory murmurs rippled through the crowd. His eyes found mine across the room, something unreadable but powerful in his gaze. Tradition has its place, he began, voice carrying without effort to every corner of the hushed ballroom, as do alliances, negotiations, and the careful balance of competing interests that has maintained order in our world for generations. A subtle shift rippled through the security teams positioned around the perimeter, Maxime's men moving with synchronized precision to new positions that suddenly seemed more strategic than ceremonial. Giuseppe's expression shifted from satisfaction to wariness as he noted the movement. However, Maxime continued, power resonating through that single word, tradition without innovation leads to stagnation and eventually extinction. The future belongs to those who understand when to honor the past and when to create new paradigms. His next words fell like bombs in the stunned silence, a declaration not of marriage alliance, but of fundamental restructuring. Territories divided by mutual agreement rather than force, operations modernized, legitimate businesses prioritized, and archaic practices like arranged marriages abandoned as relics of a dying era. The woman who once slapped me in public for threatening her brother showed me something I had forgotten existed in our world. Absolute, unflinching authenticity, Maxime stated, his gaze finding me across the crowded room. That quality has proven more valuable than any alliance sealed through forced vows. Chaos erupted as expected. Outraged traditionalists from both families, delighted progressives who had awaited such changes, and confused neutrals attempting to determine which side would ultimately prevail. Through it all, Maxime remained calmly immovable at the center of the storm he had deliberately created. I felt a presence beside me as the uproar continued, turning to find Bianca with unexpected relief brightening her features. "He's either remarkably brave or catastrophically foolish," she observed with the hint of a genuine smile. "Either way, I believe I prefer being a free woman to being his unwilling bride." When Maxime finally reached my side through the churning crowd, his hand found mine with decisive certainty. "I've spent my life playing by rules written by dead men," he said quietly, forehead resting briefly against mine in a gesture more intimate than any kiss. "It's time to write new ones." Old Giuseppe approached us through the chaos, security teams tensing until he waved them away with irritated dignity. The patriarch studied us with eyes that had witnessed decades of power struggles, his expression unreadable until it unexpectedly softened into something resembling resignation, mixed with reluctant respect. "Perhaps," the old man conceded with a wisdom earned through years of survival, "it is indeed time for new chapters to be written. The old ways brought us here, but they need not dictate where we go next." 6 months later, the restructured alliance had transformed the city's underworld into something more corporate than feudal, violence replaced by negotiation, and blood feuds giving way to mediated settlements. Not perfect, not entirely legitimate, but evolving toward something more sustainable than the endless cycle of vengeance that had defined previous generations. Jake stood beside me at the small private ceremony on Maxime's estate, my brother's recovery complete as he prepared to lead the legitimate security division of Kovrov Industries. The guests represented the new order, younger family members embracing modernization, progressives who had supported Maxime's vision, and allies who recognized the advantages of evolution over extinction. "Did you ever imagine," Maxime asked as we swayed together for our first dance, his voice meant for my ears alone, "that slapping a dangerous man to protect your brother would lead to rewriting the rules of an entire world?" Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is important for me to continue here.